Hi, I'm Louise from Husqvarna Viking UK, and I'm going to talk to you about the presser feet available for our top of the line machine, the Designer Epic 2. So these are the standard feet that come with the machine. They differ slightly to the feet that come with our other machines. I'm just going to take the A foot off there and show you why. First thing is the IDF mechanism. On our other machines, if you wanted to use a walking foot, you'd be looking at something like this, which you would take off the foot holder and screw this on instead with this little lever over the needle screw here. We don't need to do that with an Epic 2. We've got the IDF mechanism, which disengages or engages as simply as that. But the feet have to have this little slot in the back to accommodate the mechanism. We've also got 9mm stitch width, so the slot in the centre is larger, and the pattern of the feed dogs is wider, so we've widened up the feet to match. So those are the basic differences between our standard feet and Epic 2 feet. And just to demonstrate that, I've got an A foot, a standard 7mm A foot to put next to that, and if I hold them up for you, you should be able to see the difference in the width of the foot and the width of the slot as well. So looking at the purpose for these feet, this is the standard A foot. That's for your general purpose sewing. You can use the IDF with it, so you get the even feed, you've got 9mm width, and it's got a totally flat back. The B foot differs a little more. Doesn't have the IDF slot because a lot of decorative stitches have quite short stitch lengths, and you wouldn't use IDF on anything below a 1mm stitch length. So no IDF, but very similar to the A foot, apart from it's got the groove down the back, so that if you've got satin stitch or something like that that's slightly domed, it'll glide under the foot easily. We then have the manual buttonhole foot, and no IDF with that, not necessary. You notice the little lug on the back. There is actually a special little hole in the bottom of this particular slot so that that lug will fit in there. Blind hem foot, again, no IDF with that, but you've got the groove down the back so that you can run along the fold of fabric. Zipper foot. Now that does work with IDF. We've not had that before. That's a new thing. So being able to use even feed with zips, and I'm sure many of you had an experience where you've had a lopsided zip because it's not gone in straight, so that will help with that. And you can mount it either side depending on which side of the zip you're working on. So that's the zipper foot. We've got a non-stick foot, that's foot H, again with the IDF and that nice glide finish on the back. And the J foot, which is for overcasting, finishing seams, again with the IDF. And the adjustable 1/4 inch foot, which has the IDF slot. It also has an elongated hole so you can do a scant 1/4 inch seam, and lots of helpful markings on here in line with the needle, 1/4 inch in front, 1/4 inch behind. You've also got 1/8 markings on there, and your 1/4 inch is against this edge here, but you can also do an 1/8 of an inch if you use the inside of the front of the foot as well. We've got the R foot, or the floating foot, for embroidery, or centrematic foot it's known as. And then we've got the S foot, again no IDF with that because this foot's used on stitches that move sideways as well as backwards and forwards, and you can imagine this mechanism probably won't cope terribly well with going sideways. But again, you've got the groove down the back to help clear over bulkier stitches. Last thing is these little bits here, and we quite often get asked what these are, what these peculiar little things are. If I take the B foot and just turn that over, what we can do, these are little non-stick strips that you can put on the back of your feet to make them into a non-stick foot. So they just peel off, stick on where they meet with the feet dogs on the bottom of the foot, and you can peel them back off again when you've finished. So keep those handy, they could be quite useful. There are a couple of other feet in the back. We've got a special little slot for the automatic buttonhole foot, very much like the manual one, but obviously with this automatic mechanism. And we've got the sensor Q foot, again for embroidery or free motion. One thing I really need to point out to you here is it's not the same as the sensor Q foot for other models. So if you have an Epic 2, a Epic 980Q or a Ruby 90, you need to make sure you've got this sensor Q foot. Now the difference is the length of the arm, and because this needle screw is mounted slightly higher on the Epic style machines, we have to have a longer arm on here. So it's really important that you don't use the wrong one for your machine. The up to category 7 machines will take this white one, and the Epics take this pale grey one. So that's the standard feet. Now the optional feet made for the Designer Epic 2 and 9mm, we've got, I'll start with the quilting ones. We've got the adjustable 1/4 inch foot with guide. Now we get the adjustable 1/4 inch foot without the guide with the machine. So there's the guide on the side. You can see there's a little cutaway here, and it's so the feed teeth aren't damaged by the guide on the foot. But same markings on the front, same elongated hole, and obviously works with the IDF. And we have the adjustable stitch and ditch foot as well. Only difference is the guide is in the centre so that you can accurately follow your line of stitching or the ditch, and you've got again the same elongated hole so you can precisely adjust so that your stitching is really accurate. And again, the guide's cut away underneath. Then we have the edge stitching foot. Now got the IDF, we've got a 9mm hole in there, which makes it really easy to use with decorative stitches and things like that, and the plastic piece at the front obviously gives you greater visibility. We have a guide on the side so you can accurately run your fabric along that and keep your stitching exactly on track. So you can use that for top stitching, you can use it for, well, anything where you need to be a fixed distance away from another line of stitching or an edge, but you can also use them for doing nice tucks, not pin tucks but much bigger, so you can do nice folded tucks with that. Very good indeed. And its partner almost is the edging and joining foot, again with the guide, exactly the same basic foot, but the guide's in the center. So if you turn that over again, got the cutaway underneath. So both of those can be used with the IDF and 9mm, just depending on what you want to do and what you're trying to follow with the guide. We also have clear versions of these. Now these don't come with the IDF slot. These are used a lot in more heirloom type sewing, give you much greater visibility, but because we're dealing with far more dense stitching, again distance or stitch length between each individual stitch would be probably less than 1mm on most of them. We don't have the IDFs, but again the guide on the side and 9mm. And that's the clear edge joining foot, again guide in the center. So that's that little set. Now some of you may have a quilt binder, and you'll know that with the Husqvarna quilt binder you get a foot to use with the interchangeable dual feed, but that won't work on this machine because we have IDF and we don't use the interchangeable dual feed. So we've got a quilt binder foot especially for the 9mm and Designer Epic 2. So with this one you've got quite good visibility again, but you'll notice the slot in the center of the foot is not in the center, it's off to the left hand side. That's to stop the edge of the binding coming up with through the slot. and you've got a guide on the side to obviously keep your binding in line, but that's especially for using with the quilt binder. And then lastly for quilters, we've got the open toe foot. Again, uses IDF. This is great for doing things like applique or decorative stitches where you need a lot of visibility. That's lovely and open at the front there. Obviously made for 9mm. And we've got the groove down the back if you've got anything that's sort of bulky on the top of the fabric to make sure it passes under the foot evenly. But this is great for doing applique. Nice and short, you know, nice tight turning circle on that one. Moving on to dressmaking, we have a 1/4 inch foot for quilters. We have a 5/8 foot for dressmakers. So this is the seam guide foot. Again, we've got the IDF slot and we've got that guide on the side, and the markings on here. This guide is at 5/8. Another common one in dressmaking is 3/8 seam allowance. So you've got that there, but you've also got 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, and you could use this for a rough 1/8 inch as well. And you've got a line going across that's in line with where your needle will drop. So really easy to get that nice and accurate and do nice accurate seams on your dressmaking. The left edge top stitch foot, no IDF on this one. Actually, it might be a good time to mention all our 9mm feet have actually got a little 9 stamped into them in the top left hand corner there. So if you have feet for different machines and some of them are 7mm and some of them are 9, that will help you distinguish which is which. But the top stitch foot, 9mm stitch width, and it's got a groove underneath for you to run, say, a seam, the edge of a collar. If you want to accurately top stitch, I did a lot of face masks with this doing the top stitch on them. And the markings on the top, you've got a center line, you've got a line in line with the needle, and you've also got this little red mark on the front here which is exactly in line with the slot underneath, so you can see exactly where you've got to line up. That's one I use an awful lot. That's definitely one of my favorites. And then we have the gathering foot. No IDF with this one, but it's been modified for 9mm like a lot of these feet have been. We can either gather up a single layer of fabric just by running it underneath the foot, or you can actually join a gathered layer of fabric and run another piece of fabric through the slot here, which will stay flat. So you can actually gather and sew together at the same time. Then we have more decorative feet. This is the multi-line decorative foot, again being adapted for 9mm, and you can stitch a line of stitching, and rather than marking out several times parallel lines, you can actually use this foot to line up with a previous line of stitching without having to do any marking at all. It's also really useful for the omni-motion stitches, the ones where the fabric moves sideways as well as back to front, because if you have a line marked that you need to keep parallel with, you can obviously use all these red markings at whatever stage of the sideways movement it is to make sure you're staying parallel. So really popular foot, that, otherwise known as the aeroplane foot. I think you can see why. Then we have the 3-hole yarn foot, and it really does what it says. You run yarn through the 3 holes in the front of the foot. We can use this one with the IDF and 9mm. We've got the nice groove down the back, and it comes with a threader so that you can actually get the yarn through the holes easily. And then lastly on the feet, we did have a 7-hole cord foot. This for an Epic 2 is an 11-hole cord foot, and you can see those holes are quite tiny. Same principle as the 3-hole cord foot, comes with a little threader so you can get your cords through there. Perlé cotton works really well with that. You might have some real thick embroidery thread or something like that that'll go through those holes. You can even stitch onto water-soluble stabilizer and make your own braid with that. So that's the optional feet. There is one more thing. We've also got a revised version of the felting embroidery set, and the reason that's different is because the plate that covers up the feed dogs is a slightly different shape to accommodate this new stitch plate. But just to give you some idea of what you might be able to do with that, that is a felted snowflake. Isn't that lovely? But we'll go through a lot of these feet in separate videos to come that will show you exactly how to use them.